Coming up on this week's episode of CEO Yourself.
And it's really good to show people that even if you're at the helm of something, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything. Like, the best leaders know what their weaknesses are, and so asking for help or asking for an explanation is not a show of weakness. It's a show of strength. It's a humility that I think is a really important trait to show.
Charlotte Collins is the editor-in-chief of Sheerluxe. Today on CEO Yourself, we deep dive her CEO superpower, confidence. Charlotte Collins, the editor-in-chief of Sheerluxe. Welcome to CEO Yourself.
Thanks for having me.
You are literally the podcast queen. So,
as I've said to you before, I've done my fair share. However, I've never been on the other side.
It's such an honour.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming. I want to deep dive into how you got into this incredible position. Obviously, Sheerluxe is a publication we all know and love, and the way you guys have used social media to build a brand, but also identities of everyone in the team. I know my team just love following everything that you do, and we get to work together in so many ways. What you've built is so creative and playful and fun, but always on the pulse, always ahead of the game, always fresh and interesting. In a world of publishing where most publications are kind of going the other way and trying to catch up, you guys feel often miles ahead. So tell me about your journey to Sheerluxe.
Well, thanks, first of all, for all of the above. My journey to Sheerluxe, I always knew I wanted to do something in the fashion space. It's kind of always been my love. People ask you kind of what your hobbies are or what your additional interests are. And I'm like, no, there are none. It's always just been fashion. And do you want the real background, like the teenage background?
I want the teenage background. Okay, I want to go way back.
It's not that exciting, but I knew, I went to uni, I did English and French at Nottingham. I went to quite an academic school, so I'm so envious of young people today and the amount of kind of information and resources and everything kind of at their disposal. I didn't know any different. The background I came from, you went to university, you did an academic degree, and those were kind of the options. So that's not to say I regret it. I loved my time in education, and I loved my degree, but there are just so many cool ways to get into the industry now that don't involve that. Anyway, that was my path, and throughout university, did various internships. Because I studied French, I did a year abroad in Paris, and I got an internship at Vogue out there, which remains one of the funnest things I've ever done. It was insane. This is 2012 to 13, French Vogue was the most, or Vogue Paris as it was then, was the most read digital Vogue platform in the world. But of course, French isn't a particularly global language. So they had a kind of crack team of British interns translating all the French content into English. Wow. So that's just what we sat and did all day, and it was like the most fun.
Surely
ever.
That's the pinnacle.
I mean, yes, I peaked. Peaked this is it. The idea then. I mean, even now, I'm like, wow, that's so cool. It was just
incredible.
Like a dream come true. So did that, graduated, and went to work for a really small startup. I did a long internship at a really small startup, which was a bit like a Not on the High Street, like a gifting website. I did some content there. I was really set on not taking the traditional path into journalism. I really didn't want to do a journalism qualification. I just didn't have that interest in going out onto the streets and finding a story. I knew that that's what that required, and I didn't have that in me. So I just thought I'll go about this another way, and knew about Sheerluxe because the website that I was working at advertised through them, and so just emailed one day saying, "Hi, I love you so much, please, I'd love to come and work for you." And it was fortuitous timing because they had just decided to hire somebody to write on the fashion side. So I started as fashion features writer there in January 2016, and we were a team of 10.
So you've been there for years.
Just over 8 years, yeah.
Playing the long game.
I
love that.
Paid off so far.
And you've climbed your way to the top, which I think is such a nice thing to hear, because often the perception on Instagram, if you discover someone like you and you follow them and, love their style and fashion, it's that, they just landed the editor-in-chief role.
Sure.
But you've been hustling.
I've been really lucky in that it's the way the business has evolved, and the shape of the business has kind of cleared the pathway for me to do that. So it's not a kind of conventional rise to the top. We've been growing. I was lucky to get in there at a point at which it kind of was just about to hit that crazy growth. So, or we kind of, it was a slower burn than that, but at the point at which we were ready for that growth. So yes, there's absolutely been some graft in it. There's been a lot of hard work, but equally there's a huge element of right place, right time.
Right. And how many people were in the team when you started there?
10.
And how many now?
Just over 60.
Wow.
Yeah. I wouldn't have stayed somewhere, I don't think, for 8 years had it not evolved and changed. But it's been a different workplace each of those 8 years. So
a lot of people are resistant to change. I find that in my team. What that comment like sparks in me is that's what Sheerluxe has done so well, and obviously you've helped to spearhead is change and evolution. How have you guys constantly evolved with the times?
I mean, so our founder Georgie, I mean, that's like hugely down to her. She kind of has always, known that in the digital space, you're only as good as the last thing you did, and you have to keep evolving because that the whole industry is evolving and the digital space is evolving so quickly. So again, I couldn't possibly take credit for all of that, but I'd say the huge advantage that we have is a team, people like me, a team full of enthusiastic, open to change people who know that is the deal they're getting if they come and work for us, and B, a kind of nimbleness that you can only really have if you're a really small business. We are founder owned, we're privately owned, so there's no kind of red tape, heavy bureaucracy. We can try things in a way that other publishers or other businesses can't when there's a huge infrastructure there.
Now, talk to me about that girl in Paris. I assume you were very young. You're going into the Vogue Paris offices. What did you wear every day? Like, how did you... Surely that was an incredibly intimidating moment. I assume you were fluent in French.
I mean, fluent's generous, but
okay.
it was towards the end of my year abroad, so as good as I was going to be at that point, yeah.
But you're a young girl. You've moved to France. You're working in one of the most, if not the most sought after offices in the world. How did you bring your game into that moment each day and kind of, have confidence?
So this was, 12 years ago or so. And I think, I'm sure you can relate to this. I don't want to look back on it with rose-tinted spectacles, but we were so naive because the proliferation of imagery and style and everything that we have today didn't exist. Instagram was like in the very, very early stages. We had Facebook, but there were influencers. Like, I was into bloggers. I don't know about you. I was obsessed with like Amy Song of Style and Fashion Toast. those girls were Sea of Shoes. The bloggers were the only place you could go for real inspo. So I think that the mass exposure that we have to well-dressed people now, or style influencers now, has kind of led to a lot more insecurity in that space. Whereas I think back then, it's a sweeping statement, but I think generally we were more confident because, I don't know, there was less noise, I guess. So I don't remember, I wanted to look good, I wanted to look nice, it was Vogue, I was that's inevitable, but I don't remember it feeling intimidating in that way.
Perhaps because we also weren't documenting our lives.
Exactly.
So there was no pressure to wear a fresh outfit every day and to look perfect.
Totally. I probably looked totally awful, but no one can know now, so it doesn't matter, yeah.
And there is a pressure on looking good, and I recently came to the Sheerluxe offices, and there is kind of a feeling that you want to bring your best, you want to bring your A game, which we definitely don't have in my offices. We more often than not are like in athleisure, or the girls are, and I'm kind of outfit repeating in like denim or all black every day. How do you inspire that kind of culture? Because it is fabulous, and it does feel like a really positive, vibey energy in the offices because everyone is putting their best foot forward. But surely living that day in, day out is difficult for some.
It's something that people love to kind of throw at us as a criticism. Like, how could you, how awful to have to get dressed up like that every day. But ultimately, if I worked in a corporate law firm or if I worked in a sweet shop, I would still get up every single day, put on my face of makeup, do my hair, and get dressed in fashion that I love. And I think that speaks for the majority of our office. It's so not coming from a place of you must do this. There are absolutely days where I go to the office and I'm like, I'm not on camera today. I'm not wearing makeup. I'm in a sweatshirt. I'm here to crack on and do some work. So obviously part and parcel is we know we're going to be on camera, but it's a given. It's not a pressure, if that makes sense.
Being in the offices, it definitely doesn't have the Mean Girls feel or vibe that I think could potentially have been perceived.
It's so boring. It's so lazy, and it's so sexist. There are so many people out there who assume group of women, therefore, and group of women who are into the way they look, or who dress nicely, whatever, must be toxic, must be bitchy, must be whatever. And it's, as I say, it is all of the above. It's really, really lazy, and that is like the complete opposite of our working environment. It's the best group of people.
People are always going to say something. If you put yourself out there, you open yourself up to criticism.
Yeah.
We know that.
Yeah.
We live it. Mm-hmm. I get most criticism from my family, which I love. Anything anyone says about me online is never going to be as bad as what my brothers will say to my face. So, you have to have a thick skin.
Totally that.
And
really
exactly as you said, it's fairly lazy.
It's really lazy, and also I just think it's really sad. I don't know about you. I would never take the time to form an opinion on a group of people that I didn't know, let alone write it or talk about it on TikTok. So do with that what you will.
I hope you're loving this week's episode. To find more inspirational resources and to shop our new product range, visit ceoyourself.com. So let's talk confidence. I know we've already touched on it, but your CEO quality is confidence, which I think is so incredible for so many reasons. The first reason being, what I want to debunk with you is this perception that when a woman is confident, she's arrogant. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily a woman, actually, when someone is.
No, but I think the woman thing is really important because I don't think that's leveled at men, confident men, in the same way. So
they're perceived as arrogant. And I think when we title this episode and when we put up our picture and we say this is what we're diving into today, I genuinely believe many people out there will roll their eyes and go, arrogant girls. I'm not going to listen to that episode. So that's what I want to dive into with you. Let's talk about confidence and how it's required, whether you're that young girl walking into the Vogue offices in France or the editor-in-chief today. Mm-hmm. I'm sure you're walking into tricky meetings in boardrooms or dealing with difficult clients or managing HR. I know every day you wear a different hat. In fact, we wear multiple hats every day. Mm-hmm. Talk about how you've used confidence to get where you are, and then let's kind of debunk the myths around confidence.
I suppose the first thing I would say, it is in the kind of debunking space, but the first thing I would say that's really important to me is that confidence isn't a blanket term. So just because someone, I might, be really confident at XYZ, it doesn't mean that we, look in the mirror and think we're perfect or fabulous or, that there aren't insecurities, there aren't self-esteem issues. Like, the type of confidence, I guess, that we're going to talk about is partly it's confidence when walking into a room, it's outward confidence, and there's an element of inward confidence. But I want to make it really clear that you can be that person who walks into a room full of confidence, still with your own demons, insecurities, struggles, whatever they might be. So just because somebody exudes that, you can't assume that confidence is blanket. So there's that, and we'll come back to that. What was your original question about?
How you've used confidence.
How I've used confidence. Yeah. So kind of for me, it's in several ways. Broadcasting, having our face out there, as you said before, has been a huge part. It's been a huge part of the growth of Sheerluxe and the success of Sheerluxe. We have essentially kind of created, not only this really strong publishing arm, but this bank of mini, it's almost like a kind of collective of influencers in a way to, we joke, it's like people kind of pick their player. You might identify with a Charlotte or a Lou or a Heather or a Sher, whatever. So it's
like the Kardashians.
We are just like the Kardashians, exactly. So, but that has obviously been very strategic, and that's because we know people relate obviously to individuals. So, you know, I always, when I started my career, you know, whether it's at Vogue or whether it was at Sheerluxe, like I think I always knew that being a yes girl was absolutely, like, you know, imperative, that just to say yes to everything, and, you know, not to everything to the extent that you're taking advantage of, but, you know, just be that person who puts yourself forward and says yes to everything. And I would still give that advice to young girls today, to anyone, young people today getting into the workplace. It really sets you apart, because you'd be amazed at how many people are not like that. And
even beyond the work space, like
totally.
when I moved to London and I knew absolutely no one,
Right.
I had to take every single invitation or opportunity that came my way. And through that, I built the most extraordinary network just by showing up and smiling and giving it my best.
And whether it's in your social life or in your workplace, there will come a time when you can stop saying yes to everything. But it absolutely kind of got me where I am. And so I had to be confident, because I was having to say yes to things like running around in front of a camera, or, you know, all different types of things, speaking on stage, hosting podcasts, whatever. I never wanted to turn down what I knew were amazing opportunities. So I think there was a huge element of fake it till you make it in the confidence space, because I didn't want to say no to things that could lead to X, Y, Z. So I just said yes and got on with it the best I could, and sort of it worked out. I really, you know, my boss Georgie is so naturally good at all of those things, you know, whether it's hosting a podcast, speaking in front of people. And so I learned a lot from her. You know, I'm sure I must look like a mini her, because I'm sure I picked up intonations and, you know, characteristics for it in terms of public speaking, that because it's really, you know, it's amazing to have those role models. That I think that's a huge part of confidence. And I can't, you know, I guess I probably should have started with this as well. You know, you obviously cannot disregard privilege as a huge, you know, reason for confidence. I was very lucky. I had, you know, amazing female role models growing up, as well as male role models, and an amazing education, and blah, blah, blah. So there's of course a huge part that privilege has to play in that too.
Yeah, I think for me, knowing I could always fall back on my family and my, you know, I could always run home to mum and dad's. Yeah. Especially when I came to London, they were like, what's the worst that can happen? You fly home and we kind of scoop you up. And that is such an extraordinary privilege that shapes who you are, that I always feel so grateful for.
Totally.
But I'm so glad you said fake it till you make it. You literally took the words out of my mouth of what I was going to say next, because I feel when I look back at my career and what I didn't know as a younger woman entering the workforce was, you do have to just fake it till you make it. And then it just naturally develops, and like every opportunity for me led to the next opportunity, to the next opportunity. But one thing that I think is important to note is you do work hard, and it's much easier to fake it till you make it and front this confident persona when you know you've kind of done your due diligence and you've worked hard and you've ticked all the boxes and you know, sent all the emails and done all the things. I think that's an important note in your confidence, because I know your level of professionalism, and I know that you show up, and I know you go the extra mile. So then, of course, there's going to be a natural confidence with even an air of confidence that comes with
I think so. I had a conversation with a friend last night who, she works within our industry, and she's very similar to us. She's outgoing. She walks into a room, and I was telling her about this and saying that confidence was, you know, my word. And she was talking about how she could, you know, she can be the most confident person. Like, you know, she's larger than life. But if she has to do a huge presentation in front of hundreds of people, which her job requires her to do, she still gets incredibly nervous. She gets up and she does it anyway. And I was saying, I really relate to that. You know, again, confidence doesn't mean that you don't get nervous or scared or self-doubt or whatever. And we were trying to together, I was like, come on, I'm going on this podcast. What is that in us that makes us do that? Like, why are we able? Because I understand, of course, that so many people, fake it till you make it is kind of a privilege if you're someone who can get over that barrier, right? Like for a lot of people, those fears are crippling. And the conclusion we came to was almost that it becomes evidence-based. So once you've got over that fear it builds your confidence, because you know you can do it. Okay, I know, I've prepared, I'm able to do it, I've done it before, and that helps the confidence build on itself. So I think exactly that. If you do your due diligence and you do your prep and you do your work, and then it pays off once, whether that's public speaking or whatever, a piece of work, it builds and builds.
So I think that's the lesson, is putting yourself out there the first time. It's always going to be hardest the first time. Like the first episode I recorded of this, I was so nervous.
Oh, yeah.
And then obviously you do one and it's okay, and then you do another and it's great, and then you do another and it's okay.
Yeah.
And with time you build more confidence. And then, you know, what I find interesting though for me is I feel the same way. When I had to get up, I gave a wedding speech at my wedding last year. Our wedding, I should say. Actually, it was more his wedding, to be honest. But on the welcome drinks, at the welcome drinks, I should say, I got up and made a speech. And what I was disappointed in is that, like, it was physically visible, or like, for example, my voice would break, and I was, you know, the same thing, sweaty palms, my voice was shaking. I couldn't stop looking at my notes, which is so not in keeping with my natural persona. But it was such a big, meaningful moment to me that I had all the people I knew and loved in the room, and it was just once in a lifetime that I was going to, like, profess my love to the man I was marrying, that I couldn't kind of contain my emotions. So talk me through how you overcome those moments.
I think, again, there's I don't know what it is, and perhaps we can get to this together, because there are certain things I can overcome. I could never in a million years jump out of a plane or do a bungee jump or abseil. Like, there are fears that I could not overcome. I'm sure.
Skydiving is the greatest feeling of all time.
I'm sure. I will never know. Like, that will never happen for me. And I know, and it sounds glib, but, you know, so I want to be really clear for people listening, like, that if you're not able to overcome things in this way, like, that's okay. Like, it's not a given that you should be able to get up at your wedding and make a speech, because there are just types of fears and types of confidence perhaps that are innate to some of us. I also spoke at my wedding, and I was kind of a little bit nervous, and I was really, really determined. The thought came to me, like, if you're going to be nervous about this and it's going to affect your wedding day, don't, because I spoke on the actual day. I was like, why are you bothering? If you're going to feel nervous, don't ruin your wedding over this.
That's why I did it the night before.
Exactly, fair. And so I was able, and somebody had said to me actually specifically on that you will never have a more supportive audience than on your wedding day. So, you know,
I think everyone thought it was very endearing when I was, like, a blubbering mess,
exactly. I'm sure they all thought it was lovely.
But you know what's interesting about that, actually, now I reflect, my husband was so nervous he didn't want to make a speech at all.
Really?
So he got a coach, and he had her once a week, and he practiced, and he got up like Brittany with, like, a mic and didn't have any notes, and memorized this incredible speech and walked the room and owned it. And since then, he now is so confident public speaking. And it's exactly that. It's practice. Practice makes perfect. Yeah. And I think that's maybe a takeaway for the listener today of how to implement more confidence in their life is, as long as you can get over the first hurdle and do it the first time, it will become easier.
I remember when I was young, a teenager, we were at some, I don't know, like a talk with a historian. And I remember, you know, they got to the point where they said, does anyone have any questions? And I remember thinking, I've got a question, but I'm a bit nervous to ask. And I don't know kind of where this came from. Maybe it came from a place of kind of wanting to challenge myself, but within a safe space. It was a space that felt safe for me, not physically, but okay, I can't challenge myself to jump out of a plane. But this I can push myself. So, and I kind of made a pact with myself that if ever you have a question in that kind of environment, but you're scared to ask it, you have to ask that question. That is a non-negotiable. And I've kept that through to today. I will always force myself to ask that question or speak, you know, make a point or whatever it might be, even if I'm nervous, because I'm really not prepared to let that fear hold me back. I guess in the same way that when I started my career, I wasn't prepared to let saying no to things hold me back. I really, really care about my career, and I really care about making a success of it. So I'm not going to be held back by a fear.
I love that, because I had to practice that in my current role. Mm-hmm. I remember there was a meeting and I was with the C-suite and a lot of people who were a lot older than me and mostly men, and we were having some conversation about something and I actually didn't know what they were talking about. And I remember thinking, do I let this just pass by and kind of smile and nod and pretend? And I put my hand up and I said, sorry, what does that mean? And they all went, oh my God, thank God you asked, because I didn't know either. And nobody knew. Yeah. And since then, I've always practiced putting my hand up and saying, I don't know how to navigate this. What should I do? And I've been learning on the job as I go, which is the best part of the role, really. But more often than not, everyone else is in the same boat as you, or at least many people in the room. And it is quite bonding. And it's a learning.
Totally.
So I think that's an incredible takeaway for listeners.
I think it's really it's a really strong leadership quality as well. Again, I've watched my boss do that many, many times. She is not afraid to say, sorry, I don't understand that point, or like, can you just explain this? And, you know,
Because then you can
in that kind of
get
environment,
the troops together,
what's the
navigate
point?
it, overcome it, move on to the
Totally.
next.
You know, and it's really good to show people that even if you're at the helm of something, you don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know everything. Like, the best leaders know what their weaknesses are, and so asking for help or asking for an explanation is not a show of weakness. It's a show of strength. It's a humility that I think is a really important trait to show.
So let's talk about the influencers that have kind of arrived on the Sheerluxe scene, you being one of them. How do you balance your influencer life with your role as editor-in-chief, and how do you see the two kind of being married into the future?
I think it's quite hard to kind of progress in this industry now without an online presence. The sort of influencery stuff has, for most of us, there are some on our team who have actively sought that, which, you know, is awesome and have made huge successes of it. There are others of us for whom it has sort of happened naturally by default because of our roles at Sheerluxe. For me, I'm hugely grateful to that. It's really, it's fun. It's opened up new opportunities. It's awesome to work with great brands. But it's not, I think it's a byproduct now of growing in the digital space, growing within a digital publisher. You know, my career, I'm quite blinkered about my career, and that doesn't mean to say I've got it all mapped out and know what's next, but I kind of set out to do something, and that is in this space, and that is in, as an editor, that is because I love publishing, I love digital content. I mean, I love creating great content, but not for myself or of myself. And I think that's why we still have so many team members who have these huge followings, but continue to work at Sheerluxe and haven't just kind of left and made a go of that life, because we've hired people who are passionate about like that career path and that industry. And ultimately, like, that the industry has massively changed, but my aspirations within that haven't at all.
Amazing. So let's loop back to that young girl who was in education, but kind of had a vision for where she wanted her life to go. Look where you are now. You're an editor-in-chief. You're doing extraordinary brand collaborations. You're an influencer in your own right. What's next for you? Where do you go from here? I don't know personally. I mean, there's still a huge amount to achieve at Sheerluxe. There's, you know, my vision isn't going past that for now, because, you know, when you're somewhere that has just been gaining momentum, and each year we're kind of pushing through new boundaries for ourselves, we're pushing through our own glass ceilings, and that is immensely rewarding. So, you know, kind of as you said, it's, you know, we feel like we're doing something really innovative within, you know, a kind of legacy industry. And I don't know what that industry is going to look like in 5 years. It certainly looks very different to how it looked 5 years ago now. So I think it would be foolish almost to kind of predict what will happen to publishing, to magazines, to, you know, there's still huge appetite for so much of this, you know, so many of those legacy products, but equally, you know, it's so exciting seeing where you can push digital. So that's a long way of saying I have no idea. I have no idea. But because you know, we all, like, you know, anyone of my generation, of my age, not anyone, I think it changed a couple of years after me, but, you know, I'm just about to turn 33. So everyone in and around that age got into this industry thinking, well, I want to be the editor of Vogue. That was that's the end goal. And whilst of course that particular role still remains hugely coveted, that was symbolic of the nature of the industry at the time, and now it's so different. So there's no blueprint anymore, which can, you know, be exciting or terribly scary, I suppose, whichever way you look at it. But I just want to kind of keep seeing where we can push what we're doing now, because, as I say, it just keeps getting better. Confidently breaking rules.
Yeah, exactly.
Setting trends.
Exactly. Sure.
So let's summarize for the listener today your biggest piece of advice around how to bring confidence into their everyday life. Because CEO yourself isn't about becoming a CEO or an editor-in-chief necessarily. It's about becoming the CEO of your life. So how can the listener implement confidence in their life, whatever that may be?
I really hate this phrase, but I think that it is the answer, which is feel the fear and do it anyway. It's so, like, I can't emphasize enough how everyone, no matter what stage they're at in their career, has insecurities and self-doubts. And obviously, they change and I'd say it gets a lot better. It gets a lot better. I when I think about the things in my 20s, my early 20s in particular, that the huge amount of self-doubt in the career space, obviously you get validated as you move on and things bother you less and you gain perspective. And so you hugely evolve in that space. But that, of course you still have those questions and those fears, but you simply cannot get to the next place without doing it anyway. So there's just an element of sucking it up and going for it. I suppose a huge, I think both you and I are really lucky in that we are in industries. We kind of don't have to question the industries we're in. It's very much like, well, yeah, this is exactly what I want to be doing. And that's also a huge privilege. Not everybody gets to find that so young or gets to find that at all. So I suppose it's a slightly different question if you are someone who is struggling with, career-wise, kind of what you want to be and where you want to go. But I think that's also kind of feel the fear and do it anyway still applies to that. Okay, it might be really scary to sit down and try and work out what you really want or to take a leap and try something new. But I think, whatever position you're in career-wise, it can apply because you're never going to get anywhere if you're stuck in your fear.
And what I'm hearing from that as well is knowing your worth. I've had to really examine my own self-worth in a lot of moments whether it's salary conversations or bonus conversations, in a way that I've had to depend on my brothers and my husband. What disappoints me about myself, it's kind of indoctrinated in me, is the men around me are so confident in their worth that they would never question asking for what they feel they're owed, but almost to a point where they kind of demand it, and then they would be willing to walk if they didn't get it. Yeah. And that's kind of understood in the conversation, so therefore it's delivered. I've had to really drag that out of myself, and it's been such a difficult path with whatever it may be. Even if you're quoting for a job for Instagram, it's knowing that no, I know how much traffic I drive, and I know it's real traffic, so therefore I know that this is what I must be paid, and I'm willing to lose the job otherwise. How can we encourage people to kind of step into that power and their own worth? Because that's what I'm kind of on a mission to change, is for women everywhere to feel that confidence and certainty and self-worth, and to step into it and to step into that power and to make things happen for themselves.
In terms of implementing it for yourself, I'm also a massive believer, always have been, in don't ask, don't get. That's I've kind of gone through all of life like that. Ask, they can say no, that's fine. With literally that can apply to anything. That can be an extra slice of cake, doesn't matter. I really believe that if you don't ask, I
find that exceptionally hard, though, especially as a people pleaser.
I think if you're a people pleaser, God, and we've all got that in us to an extent, it's, you just have to feel the fear and do it anyway. You sort of you just kind of have to. There is no alternative, and that doesn't make these things easy. You know what? Back in 2020, I was fashion editor of Sheerluxe, and I knew I was ready for more. That kind of the confidence thing for me, kind of the way it plays out most is I really knew that I could be really senior in that business. I really knew that I really got it, and that's that's quite innate. That still is what gets me through today in those hard conversations. I just knew. It's hard to say. I guess I've been there a long time. It's kind of in my DNA. I really felt like I knew how to make the right decisions, and but I wasn't a senior person on the team at that point. And I went to my boss, and we had I said, we need to talk and we need a conversation. And the conversation was okay, you need to, I've been here since I was 24. It's time. I want to move up. And I swear to God, that morning, I would have rather jumped out of a plane. I would have rather done anything in the whole world than go and have that conversation, because it was so scary. But it worked. It really worked. Everything, all the growth that's come for me has come post that conversation, and just being a little bit okay, hello, it's this is what I need next, and
Showing
this is
up
what,
yourself.
and this is where you should take me next. And so
It's the same. One of the hardest conversations I've had to have in my career, I had to walk around the block 8 times, like literally hyping myself up
Yeah.
to step into the power and fake it completely. I was trembling and somehow put the voice on and then step into it, and then everything fell into place.
And do you know what? I used to, when I was very young, when I was in my early 20s, I used to cry in all work conversations. I would just cry. And I think that was a really pivotal point actually for me. I didn't cry in that conversation, and actually, touch wood, I've never cried at work since that conversation, because again, it goes right back to the beginning of our conversation. When you do something that's really scary, but you know, as you said, you show up for yourself, you find that confidence somewhere, and you just feel the fear and do it anyway. Like, the positive change only comes from that. And so yeah, you sort of just have to suck it up and do it.
So it's stepping into the fear. It's doing the work so that you can bring that knowingness that you have prepared.
Totally.
It's faking it till you make it. It's not being afraid to ask.
Yeah.
And over time, it's getting easier because you know, with repetition.
But I think the doing the work part is really important, because, you know, as we've talked about many times before, you know, we're faced with a generation of people who do seem to have a way higher confidence than we certainly did at that age. But with that comes a lot of expectation of, you know, all of those other things that you just said, whether it's feeling fit. You cannot go into a hard conversation or apply for a job or anything with all the gumption that those things bring you, if you're not actually doing the work and putting in the graft and doing the quiet behind the scenes things as well. So there's no point having confidence that you're the best and you should get it and you can have those hard conversations, and, you know, unless you have the kind of the goods to back it up. So I think the work comes first.
To note, because sometimes that's not matched.
No.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Okay, I'm going to close out with a beautiful quote that I think summarizes so much of what you've said today, which is actually from Michelle Obama.
Oh, yeah.
And it is, your success will be determined by your own confidence.
There you go. Spot on. Fake it till you make it.
There we go. Charlotte, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today. It was such an honour to have you. Where can people find you?
Well, you can find everything that we do at sheerluxe.com. Follow Sheerluxe on TikTok, on IG. We are making quite a lot of content all the time, so you won't be bored.
It's hard to miss.
Yeah, exactly. And I am Charlotte Leah Collins on Instagram.
Amazing. Thank you.
Thank you.
It would mean the world to me if you would share today's episode with someone you feel would enjoy it. And don't forget to hit subscribe, like, and leave a comment.